Welcome back. Industry leaders in the cannabis sector are meeting in Cape Town for this year's CannaTech Summit. South Africa is one of only a handful of African countries that have decriminalized the use of marijuana. Now, delegates are discussing how that could help boost the continent's economy. A report also suggests if legalized, the African cannabis market could be worth over $7 billion by the year 2023. Joining me now from our Cape Town studio is Hayim Raclaw, Director of Special Projects at Israel Cannabis. Hayim, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. Now, in South Africa, laws don't allow you to willy-nilly sell cannabis. How do you actually get around that?
The laws in South Africa that don't yet permit the sale of cannabis means that the industry simply isn't going to do that yet. What is happening in South Africa and what's happening in countries across this continent and across every other continent is begins with cultivation for the medicinal use of cannabis. There's a confluence of positive attributes on this continent that will enable it to drive the cannabis cultivation, refinement, and medicine production aspects. Eventually, wellness and recreational use will catch up, but that seems to be the pattern, and that's a pattern that Africa is following. Though Africa has a special confluence of aspects that are going to drive it faster, I believe, than other parts of the world.
Yeah, and of course, many would argue that making any of this possible leads to a nation that's basically high, and that's why we have these laws in place to only allow you to grow it in your home and smoke it at home, but not sell it.
That's correct for the individual. However, there are companies, African companies. There's 400 industry leaders, half of which are from this continent, right now in Cape Town meeting discussing far more than growing in their own homes. What they are discussing is a rare opportunity in the business world. I've spent 22 years in biotechnology, medical technology, 10 of those years here on this continent, and an opportunity where you can both do well and do good at the same time is rare. Cannabis represents that. The stigma of the high country simply is baseless. That's borne out by the history of the 20th century. I have had the honor of being born and raised in the United States. I've lived in Canada, which, as you or your viewers may be aware, is legal both for recreational and medical and production. That country had the first publicly traded cannabis companies. And those countries didn't decline in the manner that people who still live under, frankly, an antiquated stigma about this plant perceive. Quite the opposite happened. Jobs are created, tax revenues go up, and people are genuinely helped. I currently live in Israel. And in Israel, the research has been unfettered for decades, which is why Israel leads in cannabis innovation. ICANN runs an incubator, and that incubator is full of companies that are developing medicines, a minority of them psychoactive. Cannabis is a remarkable plant with literally hundreds of cannabinoids, a small percentage of which have been studied. But the prospects for medical use are phenomenal. The CannaTech event today in Cape Town had dozens of medical professionals in it, several of which presented groundbreaking research in the use of cannabis to help.
Yeah. So, of course, you say, and well, you don't say this, but projections are that Africa could make around $7 billion by the year 2023. How do you actually convince governments to allow this to happen, though?
You ask a question of which I think the answer was embedded in the question. A $7 billion industry is not something that a government can ignore. The tax revenues generated from a $7 billion industry is not something a government can ignore. And both the advancement of culture, in which the stigma against this plant, against cannabis, is in decline, is coupled with phenomenal business opportunities, which of course reflect very well on a government when their tax revenue goes up, when employment goes down, and when medical research takes hold. Africa as a continent, and South Africa in particular, have a unique opportunity to drive the commoditization of this product in the full value chain, not shipping raw product out, but shipping refined medicines off this continent to help the world. To own a supply chain in a way that hasn't been done before in other parts of food and plant cultivation and the extraction industry. So we're very excited about the prospects for this continent.
All right, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. That is Hayim Raclaw, Director of Special Projects at Israel Cannabis. Time now for the weather and then more of your headlines at the top of the hour.